Hello, Hey Boomer listeners. Welcome to Hey Boomer. I am your host, Wendy Green, and I am so glad to have all of you with us today. If this is your first time joining us at Hey Boomer, please type in the chat that you're here. Let us know that you're here so we can all say hi, and let us know where you're watching from. We're always liking to see where our audience is from. For your information, Hey Boomer is an interview show where we talk with scientists, authors, entertainers, and inspiring people that help us to enhance our purpose in life, that give us inspiration as to how we can make a difference and find ways to stay engaged in life. So that's what Hey Boomer is about. And if that's what you are looking for, you have come to the right place. I wanted to tell you a minute about a book club that I'm in that's called the Reverse Book Club. And in the Reverse Book Club, we work together to create a final story, but we start with one person writing the first chapter, and then we share that. And then another person writes the second chapter, and then we share that. And so the story builds as we all write an ensuing chapter. And I have to tell you, it was very intimidating the first time I did this, trying to not only write a story where you use dialogue and you develop characters and you develop things, events and things that they're involved in, but then to share that out in front of people, let other people read it, it was like, oh my gosh, especially when you're not a writer. And so I think we're going to have a fabulous time learning from Jill Korn today, who is my guest, and she is an audio dramatist. And Jill grew up listening to the BBC radio because her father had lost his sight. And so they would listen to a lot of radio shows together. And now, as a retired person, not really retired, Jill writes, directs, produces, and acts in audio plays that are available as podcasts as well as from her own website. And I'm seeing wonderful people. Hi to Glasgow. So nice to have you here. And Lisa and David and Gail and Burnham, I'm sorry, I should have said your name. You're in Glasgow. So when writing an audio drama, it's not just about the story. It's also about painting the picture with sound and words. So the sound effects are very important. And listening to Jill's stories transports you to another place and many times to another time because they're mostly historical stories. They're based on things that have happened in other times in other places. And so it is going to be my honor to introduce you to Jill later on. And we are actually going to get to hear a short clip of one of her stories. But before that, let's see, John is here from Perthshire. Welcome, John. Thank you. Yes, so I wanted to tell you my never too old stories. I started this a few weeks ago, and I love finding these stories and sharing them with you. So on Tuesday of last week, I was honored to attend the dedication of the Max and Trudy Heller Library here at a community in Greenville, South Carolina, at the Woodlands at Furman University. And Max and Trudy were Holocaust survivors who made their home in Greenville. Max built a business in textiles, and then he became the mayor of Greenville. And it is because of his vision that we have this European-style walkable, tree-covered downtown where we sit outside and we eat and we visit with people. It's lovely. Trudy passed away this past May. She was 98 years old. And in her later years, she shared a lot of her stories of what happened during her time growing up in Poland and their escape from there. And she educated children and worship communities, retirement communities, any place that would let her come in and talk, she made it her life's mission to say, it's about being kind. It's not about carrying bitterness. It's about being kind. And so Max and Trudy made a major difference in the lives of many, many people. And at 98, we will surely miss her. The next person I want to tell you about is Nina Meyerhoff. Nina is 80 years old, and she calls herself a spiritual activist. Nina started a project called the One Humanity Initiative about 6 years ago. She has spent her life advocating for children to encourage peace and understanding. And with the One Humanity Initiative, she is taking this even further by creating a city of hope located near Auschwitz, Poland, where visitors can experience the stark realities of the past alongside opportunities and models of transformation for a culture of sustainable peace and the uniting of humanity. I think these two women and Max are wonderful examples that we are never too old to make a difference. Before I bring Jill on, I just want to let you know what I want for Christmas. I want more followers. I want you to share my website with people, heyboomer.biz, and ask them to subscribe to the blog so that they will get my weekly emails about the upcoming shows and an email about the blog. And that's all they'll get. But they will recognize that this is a gift from you to them also, because now they get to become part of the Hey Boomer community where they can also enhance their purpose and their engagement in life and feel like this next chapter is a really meaningful chapter. So please share that with them, heyboomer.biz. You know, people are more likely to sign up for something if you recommend it. And thank you. And with that, I'm going to bring Jill on. Hello, Jill.
Hello, Wendy. How are you?
I am lovely and wonderful. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. A little bit husky, that's all.
Yes, Jill is fighting a slight cold, but her voice is still lovely. So we're happy to have you. Jill and I met in a podcast training program, and it really has been a great thrill for me to meet her because this is such a new thing for me. I mean, I had heard of the old radio shows, you know, like I remember my mother telling me about the War of the Worlds, you know, where they thought all of these aliens were taking over. But I hadn't heard of audio dramas, and I've now had the opportunity to listen to all of the ones that you've done, and I love them.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let me tell the audience a little bit about you, and then we'll get started with the questions. So as I mentioned earlier, Jill Korn is an audio dramatist who began writing in her 60s. Jill always loved stories in any form and was always making up stories in her head. She had done some acting in school and university, but took it no further until she attended acting classes in 2006. From there, she formed a pop-up theater group with a few friends based in Glasgow. They called themselves Stark Theater because they had no props, no scenery, and no money, just the actors and the story. And they performed these stories in cafes, pub basements, small spaces for almost a decade. And then reality was hitting. Jill was faced with the prospect of retirement and dreading boredom beyond anything else. She decided to take her storytelling seriously and went back to university and got a master's degree in creative writing. Jill has since completed 5 full-length audio plays. She describes herself as a Francophile and an English woman now living in Scotland, which gives her plenty of scope for stories of historical figures and events. And she recently gained the Creative Scotland funding to write and produce 3 plays based in her home county of Ayrshire.
Yep.
Is that how, right? I said it right? Oh, good. Good. So now I can come to Scotland.
You'd be very welcome.
Thank you. So we're so glad to have you. And I always like to start by getting to know you and letting the audience get to know you a little bit. So can you give us a brief synopsis of your life, what brought you from England to Scotland and brought you into acting and audio dramas?
Okay. I love stories. As I said to you, I love stories. And when I went to university, I decided to study English and French, because what that basically meant was I could spend 4 years reading stories and writing about them. So I did my first degree in Leeds, in the north of England. And then I went on to work as a kind of publicity girl. Well, after a very brief and very unsuccessful start as a chartered accountant, of which more later, I went on to become a publicity girl for, first of all, a publisher, and then one of these catalogue companies, you know, that used to produce huge, thick catalogues.
Yeah.
I think like yours were Sears and so on.
Right.
And so my job was pulling together actors, models and washing machines and tennis rackets and getting them into catalogues. And then 38 years ago, just about now, I moved to Scotland with my then husband and two small children. One of them was 2 years old, one of them was 2 months old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I decided that doing that balancing act that women all over the world have to do, I decided that I would work from home, and I set up and ran a small, very small craft business. But there was no internet in those days. So
Right.
I wasn't on eBay or anything like that. It was all craft fairs and so on. And when I went back to work, I fell almost by accident into learning and development, and started off developing training programs for people, for women like me who were returning to work and who perhaps lacked confidence. How did we build up their confidence? How did we build up their skills? And really, that's what I've done ever since. I've almost retired. I'm still working with young people on vocational qualifications. Hope to finish that in March. But that's been a fascinating career, because it's taken me all over Scotland, but also to different parts of the world as well, and very varied. And you learn as you go all the time. So that's been really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was funny because when we talked first, we found out I was in training development also. So
Yeah.
maybe that helps us feel comfortable speaking in front of people.
I think it does. Yeah, I think it
Yeah.
does.
So tell me about these pop-up theaters that you used to do. How did that get started?
I was stage struck from the age of about 4. I think the first time I was taken to a pantomime, it would have been in Birmingham, one of the big Birmingham theatres in the Midlands. Do you have pantomimes in the States?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I loved it. We used to go to traditional pantomimes, and people would come on, little girls tap dancing, and the prince was always a woman. The principal boy was always a woman. So that kind of went back, I think, years and years to the commedia dell'arte tradition. And I loved it. And every time I went to the pantomime, I would come away thinking, I want to do that. I really want to do that. I want to be on stage and dressed up and slapping my thigh and singing. Anyway, and none of that came to pass, unfortunately. But I did do some acting at university, very different from pantomime. And as you said, I went back in my 50s and did an acting course at Strathclyde University, which is also in Glasgow. And then some of the people I think are on this call just now, we set up Stark Theatre, and we improvised some of the plays. We wrote them a little bit like, you know, your book group. We improvised some plays. We did some scripted plays. We found various locations, some more successful than others. So I remember one play that we did, and it was two of the guys that were in that play, and it was a very intense and very serious play, and it was in the basement of a pub. And unfortunately, the owner of the pub had let the main part of the pub for a ceilidh, which is a Scottish dance.
Oh no.
So the music is very loud, the dancing is very loud, and these poor guys were trying to perform this wonderful play, actually, in the basement with all this going on ahead. So it had its moments. It had its moments, certainly.
Wow, that does sound like that was a challenge.
That was a challenge.
Yeah. Are you using any of those plays now for your audio dramas?
No, I'm not. They'd mostly be written by other people anyway, and they were stage plays. You could probably adapt the improvised ones for audio drama, but it's a very different thing. Because stage drama can use visual clues, can use movement, can use obviously the physicality of the actors. You have none of that in audio drama. It's a very different thing.
Which is what was so impressive to me when I was listening to the stories. And you have to use your imagination, but you give us the ability to do that through the words and the sound effects. So, you imagine the walking on the rocky surface, or you imagine the door opening and closing, even though you're not seeing it. So you're still giving us the physicality in some ways.
I can't take credit for that, actually. I have to say, some audio dramatists do all of that side of it themselves. I don't have the know-how to do that. So what I quickly learned when I went on my very first course on writing audio drama, you go in thinking that the writer is the most important person. You very quickly realize that not only the actors, obviously very important, but the soundscape designer is hugely important, because I might write a little aside in italics that says, Simon walks up the stairs. And the soundscape designer has to work out that this is Paris in the 1930s, that this is a wide stone staircase with echoing floors all around, and that Simon is probably wearing high-heeled shoes. And all of that will impact on the sound of the footsteps that he or she then puts into the piece. So my little one-liner, is a lot of work for somebody else to put together.
Wow. But I imagine you have to listen to the final and say, yeah, but maybe we could try this or that.
Yeah. It goes backwards and forwards a few times. Yeah.
Wow. That's I had no idea.
It's a huge part of it, and it's really important. And as I say, if I was perhaps technologically minded, I might be inclined to do it myself, but other people do it so much better.
Well, Jill, let's be real. Because we were talking before you came on, right? There's so much that we are learning at this age about the new technology, and it takes a lot of time, and you write the stories. So,
I'll stick with that.
Right. Otherwise, you have to give up sleeping and eating.
Yes, that's right.
So you went back to university to get your master's in the creative writing. What was that like being back in university after all that time?
Do you know, I'd put it off for at least 4 years, I would say. I'd had it in my head that I would do it and didn't do anything about it. And I had a conversation one day with a good friend and said, I'm going to apply for this next year. And she said, why? I said, what do you mean? She said, why are you going to do it next year? Why don't you do it this year? Just do it. And I'm a trained coach. So, that question made absolute sense.
Right.
Why not? So I put it off. And when I did turn up at university feeling very nervous, I found that I got my university, my badge, my student union card, and I was all thrilled and excited, but I was very nervous that I would be the oldest person on the course.
Of course, yeah.
How would that feel? Actually, we were a mix of ages, and I wasn't the oldest on the course. The oldest person on the course was 10 years older than I, is on her second novel.
Oh, wow.
So there was a mix of ages, and we learned a lot from each other. So there were people who were fresh out of university, straight onto a master's course. They've got a different worldview from ours. ex-police officers, people like me, ex-nurses, people who were still working. I was still working at that time. So it was a real learning experience, not just because we were sitting in lectures, but because we were discussing around the table from all of these different points of view, all of these different lives led, and different attitudes to writing. So it was a fascinating experience. I used to rush from work, which was about 1.5 miles away, rush down the hill after work because our classes were in the evening, grab a donut. Don't know how many donuts I ate.
Good dinner.
Grab a coffee, for dinner. And then turn up and kind of think with all my brain for the next 2.5 hours. I think what's hard about a course like creative writing, the parameters are difficult to set. What's right and what's wrong. There isn't a right and wrong. You don't get a right answer. There isn't a right answer. And so that's quite difficult to work out where you sit. Am I where am I in this, and is the work that I'm doing acceptable, and who is acceptable, who is it acceptable to? So I think that's quite difficult because you're not working with very defined standards and parameters. So I think that was quite challenging.
Yeah, I can see where that would be, because we're used to right and wrong answers, black and white.
Very much so. Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that idea of playing with something. If you're creating something, then you're playing with it. I think that's probably the problem with technology for our age group, that younger people play with technology till they get it right. Whereas we think we've got to get it right. I've got to get this right first time, and we get frustrated. But I think it's the same with acting. I'm sure with painting, with writing, drawing, you're playing with it to see what happens. And sometimes something really good happens, and sometimes not. But it's
I love that.
It's that ability to sit back and let yourself play.
Y'all make a note of that. I love that. When you're creating something, you're playing with it. You're waiting to see what happens with it. You don't have to know where it's going. You just have to let yourself play. Love that. That's wonderful. So the inspiration for your stories, where do those come from?
They come from everywhere. Conversations overheard, people that you meet, people that you've known in the past, real stories, or in my case, historical stories, because if you think something's really far-fetched in the modern world, then something even more far-fetched will have happened in history. You couldn't make it up, really, when you look at some of the stories that there are. Confessional, which is it's the darkest play that I've written, is based on a medieval serial murderer. It's probably not the most popular play that I've written. And that came out of a writing prompt. We were asked to write at university a very short monologue. Was it meant to be a memoir? It was meant to be a memoir. And this character had been in my head for a long time. And I think I wrote about, a page and a half of memoir. And when it went to the group, to the class, I asked the question, could this be taken any further? And the answer was, yeah, you have to do something with this. And the play became my final dissertation piece, because it developed from this very short little memoir, like a monologue speech, really, into a full-blown audio play, which has 2 stories actually running through it. Quite a complicated play. So ideas can come from anywhere, and I think you have to be really open to hearing them. They're there, they're out there all the time. You've got to be open to hearing them.
I want to share a clip from one of your other stories called The Escort. Can you set the scene for this before I play it?
Yes, this was interesting because this was part of an international series. So I was asked to write a piece about the possible murder again, of of a very evil public character, public figure. So the premise was that we know that this person was killed and we know where he was killed. We don't know who did it. And each one of the authors was asked to put forward a piece about the person who might have done it. And mine was a young woman who is living a secret life as an escort and who thinks that her mum doesn't know. And when her mum finds out what she's doing, she brings the daughter into her plan to do away with this man as a form of revenge for the harm that he's done her family.
And you are the one performing this, is that right?
Yes, because it was lockdown and I had to.
All right, I'm going to play it. You don't hear it?
No.
No?
No.
All right. You don't hear it at all?
No.
Okay, hold on. Let me try that again. Why am I not hearing it? Hold on, people. It's not muted. All right, I'm going to add it to the stream, but it doesn't look good that way. So we'll try this again. Now tell me.
Hello, Dad. How you doing, eh? How's my handsome dad? I'll sit you up a bit, shall I? Where's your remote? I think that's okay for you now. Has Mum said anything to you, Dad? About Don Johnson? I wonder if you can hear me. I'm not sure whether I want you to or not. I miss you, Dad. I miss my big, strong, handsome policeman, Dad. I remember when the phone call came, you know. I was only 9. I heard Mum's voice change and I knew something was wrong even then. We thought you'd be back that weekend. We'd sort of got used to you working away in London, but we always looked forward to you coming home. You used to bring me daft presents, do you remember? London bus keyrings and Union Jack slippers. Even when we saw you in the hospital, we thought you'd get better. Policemen get beaten up every day, don't they? And most of them get over it. But not you. Not a senior specialist in economic crime, seconded to look into the money laundering shenanigans of Donald T. Johnson. The Met knew who was behind the beating, all right, and they didn't have a shred of evidence. For a long time, they thought they'd be looking at murder. But you survived, didn't you, Dad? Just.
Yeah, it's a great story. And I want to show you all where you can find these stories. So Jill has a website, jillkorn.com, and all of the audio plays are available there. And so the one we just heard that clip from is the Escort. So go back and listen to that so you get the full rest of the story. But it was wonderful. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It comes back though, you know, when you listen to that scene, you know that there's another person in the room, but you know he can't speak. You know he's in a bed and he's on a breathing machine. You only know that because of the soundscape that's been designed.
And you hear his heart rate pick up a little bit when you mention the name. Yeah. Of course, you probably don't know this, but Don Johnson is an actor from Miami Vice here in the States. So oops. Different Don Johnson.
Different Don Johnson, definitely. Right. Definitely.
So now you just got a grant to write 3 plays about Ayrshire County. So
yeah,
can you tell me about the process? What does that mean? How long is it going to take to put these plays together?
I have a year to do it in. Fortunately, I had already made a good start on 2 of the stories, actually, 2 of the plays. Ayrshire it's the part of Scotland where I live. It's southwest of Glasgow, and it has a beautiful coastline, and you can see islands off the coastline. Some of my plays are about the islands. It's a little bit overlooked, this county of Ayrshire, but it's where Robert Burns, the poet, originates from. He was born here. And yet people tend to pass through it and go to Edinburgh or the Highlands or wherever. So I thought it would be a good idea to celebrate this county and write 3 very, very different plays about it. They're not a series of plays, they're completely separate. So one of them, the first one, which is in production at the moment, is again set on one of the islands that lies off the coast. There are lots of tales and myths and legends around these islands, which probably nobody believes anymore, but they make great stories. The second one is about Robert Burns, because although he's very much written about and very much spoken about, particularly in Scotland, there are aspects of his life that perhaps people are less aware of. And I think that's always interesting if you're writing a historical play, to go into perhaps a well-known story and find an angle on it or a viewpoint on it that is different from what people normally see. A lot of writers do that by working from a female point of view. And that's a little bit what I'm doing with the Burns play. And the third one, which I haven't written yet, is about 2 local families who found themselves on opposite sides of the Jacobite rebellion, which it wasn't a civil war. It could have been a civil war here in the UK generally, when Bonnie Prince Charlie tried to come back and take back the throne. So it's quite a well-known piece of history, but this is from the point of view of 2 particular families and how they found themselves on opposite sides of that struggle. So it's quite a lot of work for someone who's retired.
Keeps you busy though, and from being bored.
I'm definitely not bored.
And lots of research, I would imagine.
Yes, a lot. So that's been a slight difficulty, because during lockdown it's been really difficult to get access to the libraries and archives. And some material is available online. Some of it has been digitized, some of it's not. And some of these very old papers are only accessible by going physically to the place to see them. And that's become really, really difficult. So I've had to wait for quite a long time to go and see some of these papers and so on.
So how are things in Scotland now? Can you get out?
Yeah, we can go out and about. It's I think the figures were climbing for a while, but because we've all been mostly people have been double vaccinated now, and so people are not perhaps as nervous as they were. So we can go out. We're expected to wear masks in public places and so on, but the libraries and the archives have just been very kind of, oh no, you can't come in.
No, still.
Stay away. Yeah. I think I'm meeting somebody next week. I've been waiting for several weeks to actually go look at those papers. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And do you have your actors and sound people lined up?
Well, the first one has been recorded and is with the producer just now. I think he's online there, making sure I don't put a foot wrong. And we're waiting for the music to be written for that one. The second one, which is the Robert Burns one, I haven't got the actors lined up yet. That's something that I really I need to get started on, because we want to record that in February.
In fact, I did see on your website or your Facebook page, I think, that you were recruiting for actors. Is that right? Yeah, for that play.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, and they could be for anywhere, right? They don't have to just be from Scotland.
Well, that particular play, they probably do. In that particular one, they probably do, because it's about Robert Burns and everybody in it is from this part of Scotland. So yes, we probably will be doing. It's interesting though, because a lot of audio dramatists, modern audio drama, because of the technology, it doesn't have to be recorded with everybody in a studio. You can record it anywhere in the world and have different people recording their lines anywhere in the world. And then an editor kind of chops that up and puts it together.
Amazing.
I haven't done it like that because I don't know. I think it must be my theatre background. I like to have people in the same room, interacting with each other, acting off one another rather than just reading their lines and somebody else reading their lines somewhere else.
Yeah, or at least using like a Zoom technology, something where you can see each other.
That's right.
I would think so. I would think that would make sense. So you have really done an amazing job of reinventing yourself with this, going from being an accountant for a brief period of time, and then training and development, and then creative writing, and now the producer and writer of these great audio dramas. So what have you learned about yourself through that process, Jill?
Oh, gosh. I think that nothing's ever wasted. Even being a failed accountant isn't wasted, because I can at least set up a spreadsheet and track the money that's come in through the grant. If anyone asks me, I can show exactly where it's gone to. I can do the whole double entry bookkeeping thing. So I think it's, and you mentioned earlier, presenting yourself. If you've been in learning and development, you've got to stand up in front of groups of people that you've never met, and you've got to present information or interact with people in a way and gain a rapport. I suppose that helps when you're working with groups of actors perhaps that you haven't met before. I think all of the skills that you've learned that you wondered whether they'd ever come in useful again, they do, and you draw on them often without realizing perhaps that you're doing that.
I think that's very wise. I have a couple of comments here. Burnham says he loves The Escort. It's an intriguing story and full of humanity. I agree. And John giving us an applause here. Thank you, John. Oh, I think that was just for you, Jill. So I'm curious, is audio drama potentially a money-making kind of an endeavor?
Not the way I'm doing it. No, I don't think so. I don't think so. And, when you go onto the forums of audio dramatists, many of them will say, I'm doing this for fun, doing this for the fun of it. It's tricky because if you want to work with professional actors and producers and musicians, you really should be paying them, and perhaps people will come forward for the first couple of plays and they'll do it as a favor. But it's not really fair to expect professional creatives to keep doing that. So I think it's always going to be an issue. Grant funding is great. I was thrilled to get the money because it means I could say to people, right, I'm going to pay you for doing this. I'm going to pay you what it's worth. There are commercial companies. Well, there's the sponsorship. There's things like Patreon and Coffee where people can donate, or Patreon where people can sponsor you. I haven't really gone that route yet. Probably have to think about that at some point. But also in the UK, we have a number of commercial companies who produce plays mainly for the BBC, not necessarily, but mainly for the BBC. And I suppose it's a bit of a case of you keep going and you hope that one day somebody will commission you and pay you to do it, I've got a project on at the moment. It's quite interesting because I've got a project on at the moment, coming back to your book group idea. I've been asked to put together a proposal for what I'm calling listening groups.
Oh.
So instead of a book group, people would listen to a piece of audio drama and talk about it. And I think these could be digital groups. They could be people who are not sighted. They could be people who are remotely placed somewhere who've got perhaps used to using Zoom and digital media to get together. So I think that has real potential. So I've been asked to put together a proposal for that. So having said I'd never do training and development again.
I know, but we don't get away from it because that's just who we are too.
That might come to pass.
Yeah, that's a really interesting idea. And I think you have identified the audience as well. People that, people that are stuck at home, people that are have lost their sight. I mean, all of that would be a wonderful way to get together.
I think it would. I think it would, because it doesn't really, an audio drama has that advantage. You know, you mentioned earlier on that my father lost his sight later in life. He lost his sight. The beauty about audio drama is you don't need to be able to see anything. You're not at any disadvantage.
Exactly.
With regard to understanding and getting involved in the piece, you know.
Yeah, and for people like my mother and many older people, hearing has become an issue, but still with audio drama, you can turn up the sound, or if you are hearing impaired but visually able, you can do the closed captioning.
Yeah.
You can still participate. So
Yeah.
So it is. I'm excited to see where you take this.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So are there 2 or 3 takeaways? I mean, you've shared a couple of lovely things with us about, nothing is wasted and creating something, you're playing with it. I'm just wondering if there are 2 or 3 takeaways, or if you want to expand on that you could leave for our audience.
I think we're often inclined to underestimate what we've learned, perhaps in our professional lives, or even in our domestic lives. When I was working with women returning to work, one of the things that we were looking at was, you come into the workplace and you think you don't know anything, but you're forgetting all of what you have learned. If you've got children, you're a project manager, you're a budget manager, all of these things. And so I think you can carry that forward even further and say, well, how can I use even something that didn't seem useful at the time? I learned it. How can I use it to enhance my life now? If you're looking forward to a boring retirement, or you don't know what to do with yourself, I think the question is, well, what do I already know? What can I already do? And how can I take that forward and use it to enhance my life, but hopefully to enrich other people's lives as well? It's just never too late, is it, really?
It's never too late, Jill. And that's what I'm trying to do with Hey Boomer too. So this has been wonderful to get to spend some time with you and learn more about your story. I've shared your website, and Sound Escape Theater is what you were calling the production side of what you're doing. So I hope that you all will get the opportunity to check out Jill Korn's stories. They're really very interesting. So I appreciate that we met. I'm just excited that we met. Yeah.
Yeah. When we met, I was actually on the Isle of Arran. I was on holiday on the Isle of Arran when we first met. So that's where some of the stories are based.
Very nice.
You'll need to come and see it.
I will love that. I would love that. Let me tell people about who's coming next week. On Monday, December 13th, my guest will be Mary Flett, and she is a retired psychologist. She's the author of a 3-book series called Aging with Finesse, and the creator of 5 Pillars of Aging, helping all of us to age better and age well. She's warm, caring. She has a wonderful sense of humor, so I think we're going to have fun talking to Mary. Burnham has a question before we go. When do your Ayrshire plays broadcast?
Ooh.
Ooh.
The first one is due to be podcast in February. And then I think one's certainly in August, and the other one is somewhere in between. That's all I can remember.
Stay tuned. Check out the website. Anyway, thank you all for joining us today. I know your time is busy. John Burnham, I hope you'll come back and be part of the Hey Boomer community. And Jill, you as well. And help me grow the audience. Send people to heyboomer.biz and ask them to subscribe. And remember, you are never too old to set another goal or dream a new dream. My name is Wendy Green, and this has been Hey Boomer.